Have you ever thought about what it would be like for a victim to actually have a confrontation and meeting with their perpetrator? Welcome to Crossroad Connection. We're speaking out for those left unheard. My name is David Schuringa. I'm the president of Crossroad Bible Institute and the host of Crossroad Connection. Today, here in the studio, I have with me a good friend and colleague. His name is Jim Vanderschaaf. And Jim is the executive director of the Criminal Justice Chaplaincy, headquartered here in Grand Rapids. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here on the program, and we're going to be discussing a very, very important issue today that's becoming more and more important as people understand that maybe restorative justice is better than retributive justice. But first of all, just tell us in general about criminal justice chaplaincy, and then we'll get to the topic of the day.
Okay, sure. I can give you a little bit of an idea as to fundamentally
What does it do?
what we do, what we are about. We are primarily an aftercare and reentry ministry for people coming out of jail and prison, and we end up working with the individuals, what we call returning citizens, as well as some of their family members who might need services while they are incarcerated. And so we provide case management, pastoral counseling, spiritual counseling, and we also have a support groups for primarily for women.
These are for women whose husbands are incarcerated?
Some of them, right, some of them whose husbands or boyfriends are incarcerated, and some who are returning from jail or prison.
Okay, got it.
And some who may be in halfway houses for recovery of various sorts. Then we also have a mentor program, which is primarily designed for adults.
For the returning citizens?
Right. And some for children of incarcerated parents as well. So we have approximately 85 to 100 volunteers who do the mentoring for us.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's a very holistic program, it sounds like.
Yes, we also try to hook people up with a group called Healing Communities in the Grand Rapids area.
Yep, I'm very much aware of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. How long have you been doing this?
33 years.
33 years.
Right.
And you're the founder of the organization?
I'm the founding father, and it's hard to get rid of me at this point.
It's pretty hard to get rid of a founder, that's right. But I don't think anybody wants to. Also, this was started in the church, right? Church of the Servant and other area churches saw the need for this back in the 80s.
Correct. In the late 70s, they began a study committee by Classes Grand Rapids East with
Of the Christian Reformed Church.
Of the Christian Reformed Church, right, to look at doing a ministry of aftercare and reentry as opposed to a traditional behind-the-walls type of ministry like prison fellowship and others.
Right.
So that was the primary focus. And we are still doing primarily just that. However, we have been recently looking at, with some changes in the policies of the Michigan Department of Corrections, to do mentoring on the inside prior to release, and then continue to mentoring them on the outside after release.
So you guys have been right on the cutting edge of these more recent developments of understanding that returning citizens need help on the outside. You can't just release them at the gate and say good luck. They face many, many hurdles, personal and in systemic problems in society as well. Right. And then the Michigan Department recently, of course, before this new initiative, you weren't allowed to work with people inside prison and outside prison. The Department of Corrections didn't really like that, right? They had to choose one or the other. Exactly. But now you can start with them, 6 months before they're released, develop that relationship with the mentor, and then when they get out, continue that. And has that found to be a much more seamless and better approach?
Well, it's an ideal process. Because what happens is you begin the contact and the relationship on the inside, and upon the release process, the idea is that you will begin to support those folks, and you will also hopefully incorporate them into a local church.
Absolutely.
And that's what Healing Communities was purported to do.
Because churches aren't always ready for that, are they?
No, they're not. No. And they definitely need some kind of training, and we provide that. We help them to develop some policies.
Yep.
And also they need to understand what it means for a returning citizen who is a sex offender coming back into their communities.
Right, a big deal. And
very complicated.
And sometimes churches that are willing to do it go into it kind of romantically and idealistically, because if they're not properly trained, then they can get burned. So it's very important that churches receive returning citizens, but it's very important that they get training for it.
Right.
Let's talk now about the topic of the day, which I think our viewers will be very interested in, and that is victim-perpetrator reconciliation or restoration. You are involved in some of these kinds of meetings?
In some respects, although it's a minor portion of what we do. It hasn't been very well developed for a number of reasons, and I think the primary reason is because the victims aren't often very much interested in meeting with the
That's what I wanted to talk
perpetrators.
to you about.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Talk more about that. The victims are not interested in meeting with the perpetrators. There's just too much pain inflicted. There's anger. What's going on?
If you consider that a victim who has been assaulted to various degrees, and particularly with a sexual assault, they do not want to meet their perpetrators or talk with them. However, if it's a lesser type of crime and more involved with the addiction phenomena for which many people get incarcerated, they are more likely to talk with the individual and to look at the issues, what caused that to begin with, and then the incarceration process. And in some respects, we're talking about girlfriends, we're talking about boyfriends, talking about spouses who have been in the process of living with these folks for many years, and then they are shortchanged when the husband, boyfriend, or father goes off to prison. So we try to get them back together. We try to reconcile also, get the mother and children back together. In many cases, when the mother goes to prison, the children go into foster care. So if we have provide mentors for some of those children, then we get the mothers and the children back together as well. And they work with agencies like Bethany Christian Services, among others, to try to bring that reconciliation about. In some cases, the neglect and abuse by the mother is a primary issue as to why that's not going to happen upon the release process. But that's the ideal situation.
I think a lot of people, our viewers, may not realize that that victims are not always really very well cared for in our system, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, when it comes to prosecuting the case, the victims really aren't even an issue anymore, right? Because it becomes a crime against the state. They may use the victim as evidence,
Right.
but there's not really a lot of care for that victim, and also they don't really want the victim to meet with the perpetrator.
Well, there is this process of what is called the victim witness program for the various district and circuit courts in our state, in which the victim can write a victim impact statement and can also go to the hearing, the sentencing hearing, to give their input with the judge and with the perpetrator right there in the court situation, to let them know how the crime has impacted their lives, what the net result has been as a result of the crime, and can even make a recommendation to the judge about what the kind of sentencing they think they should meet to the perpetrator.
But let me have a little pushback on that. I understand that at the sentencing they can be there and they can say something and so forth, but they had not had a personal conversation with that perpetrator at all.
Correct.
So it can still be kind of out of vengeance, couldn't it? And anger, because they haven't really had an opportunity for forgiveness to be. I mean, there's something not quite right about that, it strikes me as a Christian, but what do you think?
I agree with you. I think it's a situation which is a relationship at arm's length.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, of course, the perpetrator has been given a no contact order,
right?
Particularly if it involves an assault on the woman, let's say, on the female. so those are difficult circumstances. And over time, we find that people are much more willing to forgive the aspects of how they were victimized. And so it takes a great deal of time to bring them together. I remember years ago there was a negligent homicide taking place on a man's son who we talked with, and so we dealt with the perpetrator as an agency, and later on had conversations with the father of the son who was killed. But the father was in no way willing to meet with the perpetrator after he had
killed his son.
Killed his son after he had done his time and was going to be released from prison.
So this is a few years later already.
This is going then 10, 12 years after.
And he still
did
not want to have any contact.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which says, of course, that the person that the father of the victim has been so seriously wounded, emotionally wounded, that he's not ready at any time to really do the reconciliation.
But also really carrying a grudge that's probably bringing him down.
Yes, there's a price to pay for all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's why restorative justice really says if it's possible, they should be able to meet so that the victim can look in the eyes of the perpetrator and says, do you realize what you did to me? And this is how I felt. And this is how this had an effect on me.
Right.
And possibly, if they're a Christian, but they can say, but I forgive you. And then the perpetrator experiencing that grace, it can be transformational, can't it?
Yes.
But now we're talking about the ideal situation.
Yes.
It doesn't always work out that way.
No. The reality is that it's a very small portion of people who are perpetrators and victims will ever get together to do the reconciliation.
Wow.
That's the reality of it. Yeah.
That's sad, isn't it? Because that could be so wholesome if we can experience forgiveness. But people, we live in a society of revenge and retribution, don't we? I've seen situations, maybe you have too, that they think that they're going to feel better when the perpetrator gets a particular sentence or a death penalty or something like that. But if you talk to them later on, revenge leaves a bitter taste in the mouth, doesn't it?
Right.
It doesn't really make them feel as good as they thought it was going to.
No. When you consider the movie Dead Man Walking and the novel as it was written by Sister Helen Prejean, whom I have met personally on a number of occasions, and you have probably as well.
In fact, we're going to probably have her lecture here in the spring. So.
Oh, really? That's wonderful. I hope to attend that.
Yeah.
She's a dynamite person in many respects, and so that whole process of what it means to forgive and not to forgive is very clearly delineated in the book she wrote, as well as the movie with Susan Sarandon and others. So it clearly indicates what the issues are.
Well, this has been a real treat to have you here. What can people be praying about for criminal justice chaplaincy? How can they get involved? And do you have a website?
Yes, we have a website called cjcministry.org.
Okay, we'll put that on the screen. We appreciate what you're doing. You can use some more volunteers? Do you have enough?
Yes. We could use volunteers any day of the week, primarily for mentoring. We train mentors.
Okay.
We have 2 nights of training, and we do an orientation to the criminal justice system. And they also get to meet a person who's been inside and who's being mentored. And then we do a kind of a skills training session for people about the do's and don'ts of how to interact with individuals and their families.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and it's
so. Are the volunteers at risk?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, that's the first thing people will think. That this is kind of scary. These are ex-criminals, but you train them and they can help. Finances, can people donate?
You bet. Yes, no question about it. That's always one of the uppermost things of any nonprofit agency, as you well know.
It's a constant battle, isn't it?
Right. Donations are always welcome, and but But the primary thing that we're interested in is the volunteer component.
Sure.
And that also goes
That's also a contribution.
it's a major contribution.
Right.
It's more significant than the other stuff. Yeah.
Jim, thank you so much for being with us. This has been this has been a thrill to have you here and hear about criminal justice chaplaincy.
Right, thank you.
We've been talking with James Vanderschaaf, who is the Executive Director of Criminal Justice Chaplaincy. Thank you for being with us. And even though we're a bit discouraged that restorative justice and victim perpetrator reconciliation is not happening more frequently, God is beginning to do a work. And we are confident that the more people get their heads and hearts around that, the more, the better our society can become, and relationships can be more healthy, and there can be true healing for the victim as well as for the perpetrator. Thanks for being with us this week, and I hope to see you again right here next week.